Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. This is going to be part 2 of our 3-part series all about tissue types. Today we're going to be covering connective tissues. Connective tissues are a wide variety of tissues. There are a lot of them, everything from something hard like bone to something pretty much liquid like blood. There are some commonalities and we'll talk about those and then the different types. So first, some basics about connective tissue. The functions of the various types of connective tissue include these: binding structures together, providing support and protection, serving as frameworks or scaffolding for organs. They fill open spaces, they store fat, they might produce red blood cells, protect against infection, repair tissue damage. So again, there are a wide variety of connective tissues and therefore a wide variety of functions of those tissues. Now, the general structure is what they all have in common, is that the cells are generally spread far apart with extracellular matrix between them. And so here's a diagram. These would just be 2 cells and everything between them is extracellular matrix. Extracellular means outside of the cell. The extracellular matrix is composed of fibers that are generally made of protein and a ground substance. The ground substance might be solid if it's bone, it might be gel if it's cartilage, or it might be liquid if it's blood. Now there are many cell types in the different types of connective tissue. I'm just going to cover 3 here. Fibroblasts. They're large and star-shaped cells. They secrete proteins that become the fibers that compose the extracellular matrix. Another one to note, they're called mast cells, and they're near blood vessels underneath the skin. They release a substance called heparin, which helps to prevent blood clots, and they also will release histamine. Histamine is what is responsible for a lot of allergic reactions, but histamine, it's meant to do is to cause inflammation to fight against infection or damage to a blood vessel or skin. There's a disorder of the skin called dermatographia, and what it is that the mast cells in those people underneath their skin are extra sensitive to mechanical stress or touching, scratching, slapping. These people usually just say that they have sensitive skin, but what it means is that if they even just scratch their skin lightly, it will turn red and puff up because of the histamine. Those 2 types of cells are called fixed cells. They stay where they are. There are wandering cells in connective tissue as well. One type is a macrophage. A macrophage is a type of white blood cell. You generally think of it as fighting infection, but they also eat up broken parts of cells that have broken down because they were old, and certain types of cancer cells as well. In addition to the major cell types, there are major fibers in connective tissue as well, common to the connective tissues. Collagen is a type of fiber. It's made of protein called collagen. They're thick, they're strong, they're flexible, but not very elastic. There are elastic fibers, also made of a protein, but the protein is called elastin. These are thin, they're weaker, but they are elastic. Reticular fibers are thin, they're still made of collagen, but they are branched. So they're not as strong as these thick collagen fibers, they're thin collagen fibers that are branched. Now we're going to move on to the types of connective tissue. There's loose connective tissue, dense connective tissue, cartilage, bone, and blood, with a few types of some of those. Loose connective tissue, there are 3 types, and these are cells that are far apart. There's a lot of ground substance between them. So the first type is called areolar connective tissue. It's very thin, delicate membranes or sheets. Membrane is a sheet. There are fibroblasts, and they're surrounded by gel and collagen, or some elastic fibers. This type of tissue, this areolar tissue, is underneath your skin. It binds it to the body, fills spaces between muscles. Adipose tissue is fat tissue. Sometimes it is cushioning organs inside of you. It can cushion some joints like your knees, insulates the body to help it stay warm, and stores energy. It can be white adipose tissue or brown adipose tissue. White adipose tissue is generally the kind that is associated with poor health conditions. Brown adipose tissue has a lot of mitochondria and helps keep the body warm by burning energy. Reticular connective tissue is mostly made of thin fibers, and they serve as a framework or a scaffold for internal organs. And so the way that a kidney gets to be the shape of a kidney is that there is some of this reticular connective tissue inside of it, kind of serving as framework or scaffold for the actual kidney cells to grow into. There have been attempts to create organs in the lab where they will just take some kidney cells and try to replicate them. They generally don't end up looking like a kidney. They generally end up looking like a chewed up chicken nugget or something like that because they don't have this framework, this scaffold to grow into the correct shape. Dense connective tissue. It's called dense because it's got a lot of closely packed collagen and elastic fibers. There are fibroblasts in there spread out, and there's very poor blood supply. These are things like tendons, ligaments, and the sclera, which is the white of the eye. Because it doesn't have good blood supply, these things, tendons and ligaments and the outside of your eye, do not heal well. Blood contains everything that is needed for something to heal and repair, and that's why these tissue types, this dense connective tissue, does not heal quickly because it does not have a good blood supply. Next, we'll look at cartilage in general, and then the three types of cartilage, and move on to bone, something very similar to cartilage. Cartilage is fairly rigid compared to these other types of connective tissue. It provides support, can serve as frameworks for things to grow around, can serve as places for other things to attach to, can protect, and can be a structural model for many bones as they form. So before many bones become harder, they start off as cartilage and the bone grows into the cartilage. Chondrocytes is the technical term for cartilage cells. They exist in open spaces called lacunae. Those lacunae are embedded in collagen fibers crisscrossing and then a gel substance. There are three types of cartilage. Hyaline is the most common. It's found on the ends of bones so that in joints the two bones don't rub together and grind each other down. It's also the part of your nose, the soft part of your nose. The rings in your trachea that keep it open and allow you to breathe, those are made of hyaline cartilage. And developing bones. As stated before, bones generally start off as cartilage, and as they develop and progress, the cartilage becomes bone. Elastic cartilage is more flexible because of its name. These are things like your external ear and your voice box. Fibrocartilage is the toughest type, and its job is to cushion the vertebrae. So when people talk about discs in their vertebrae, they're talking about fibrocartilage discs. You also have some of this in your knees and between your pelvic bones for cushioning. While cartilage is rigid, bone is even more rigid, and that's because the ground substance is not a gel, but is a set of mineral salts, calcium phosphate and calcium carbonate. There are some collagen fibers in bones as well, so for a little bit of flexibility, otherwise they would be too brittle. And what bones do is they support structures, they protect organs, like your ribs protect your internal organs or your skull or your spine. They store marrow, which produces blood cells. There's also another type of marrow called yellow marrow that is made of fat and stores energy. Bones also store calcium for you. You need calcium for your muscles to work, including your breathing muscles. And so if you don't get enough calcium in your diet, your bones will break down and provide that calcium for your muscles to function. So in that way, bones store calcium for you. And then at the bottom here, I just put that the technical term for bone cell is osteocyte. And finally, blood. Now there's not a lot here, which does not mean that blood is not important or that there's not a lot to know about blood. It's just that we'll cover this in much more detail in a later unit. So blood, its job is to transport materials through the body, but also to protect against infection. That means that your immune system is in your blood. Blood is composed of things called formed elements and plasma. The formed elements are cells or parts of cells. Red blood cells that carry oxygen are called erythrocytes. White blood cells that fight infection are called leukocytes. And platelets that help the blood to clot or to stop breaks in blood vessels are called thrombocytes. Now, platelets are not technically cells. They are broken off pieces of large cells called megakaryocytes. Blood plasma is what the cells float around in, and it's mostly water, but then there are dissolved proteins that serve different functions, like there are blood clotting proteins that help to stop breaks in blood vessels. There's also albumin, a type of protein that helps keep the blood pressure up. Then there are also dissolved substances, whether they're salts, whether they're nutrients that you've ingested, or waste products that need to be eliminated. So that in a nutshell is connective tissues. You're going to be looking at microscope slides of these now in class to identify the different types. Now again, they have a wide variety of ways that they look and functions, but those key things are that the cells are more spread out, that there are protein fibers, and a ground substance around the cells. Thanks for making it this far, and I'll see you in class.
Yeah!